Hello and welcome to our video here. So this video will help you to get started with using memoQ, and we'll do that in two parts so that it's easier to remember and to follow. So first, let's open memoQ. So at the moment we are looking at this version, memoQ 9.10. If you want an overview of what memoQ is, pricing and all that, I'll put a link to the video I did on Robert's channel, Freelance Translator Tips. Okay, so if you want, you can have a look at that. And now we'll see how we can get started with using memoQ for translating when you are a freelance translator. So now we are in memoQ. What we see here is what is called the dashboard. The dashboard is the section that is used to manage the start of your work. And all is organized in projects. So whenever you want to translate even a single file in memoQ, you need to create a project or to add it to an existing project. Now here at the bottom is your project list. And you see here I have a local project, but if you receive a project on a cloud solution used by a translation agency and they want you to work on it, so you'll get an email and that will bring you here in memoQ, and you would see a new project in this area with a little cloud on the side of it, meaning it's a web project. Okay, so you can get started with this section here. But what I suggest you do before starting anything is to organize what you want your default settings to be in memoQ. And that's interesting to do that because these default settings will apply to any new project you create in memoQ. So that will save you a lot of trouble if you start with things organized the right way. And that is done by accessing this section here with the gear wheels. And that will enable you to set up all your options in memoQ, well, many of them anyway. And what I suggest you do first is set up spelling and grammar. And you want to have this checked, so check spelling as you type, and select the language, so that will be the target language that you want to be able to check. And then you have the option to use either Unspell or Microsoft Word if you do have a paid subscription for Microsoft Word working on the same machine. And so you can select that. Okay, so you need to have both boxes checked here. And so if you're using Unspell, well, make sure it does appear here. If not, you can try to click on look for more Unspell dictionaries online for your specific language. So that's that for spelling and grammar. Now we want to go to default resources. And let's say you are using machine translation. If machine translation is something you want to use with your project, so you come here and click to this cheap empty icon. And as you see here, there is absolutely nothing. It is empty. So you can work by selecting specific empties for a specific language, or you can just have empty selected for the same empty for all the languages you'll be translating in. Well, you'll know that depending on how your empty performs. So the step you need to take is create new. And you see here create new, clone, delete, edit, import new, export. These buttons here and the way this works in this particular dialogue, you need to get used to it because you will find that in many parts of memoQ. So let's see how it works. So I want to create new. So this setting here is just the name for the setting of that empty I'll be using. So I will call it my empty setting 1. Okay, so let's call that like this. And now I have something that appears here. And now I have to give it the settings I want to attach an empty provider to it. So now that it's selected, so it's highlighted in blue, I click on Edit, and that brings me this panel here. And this has the empty providers that are capable of being connected to memoQ. And these are basically plugins. So memoQ programs these plugins in collaboration with these empty providers. And say you want to use DeepL, so you click on DeepL. And then with this gear wheel, you will be able to configure your plugin. And that will bring all that is specific to DeepL. Okay, so you can put your key here, your API key, then decide the formality, and that's it. And if you want to use another empty provider, well, that's the same. That will bring their panel specific to what this empty can do. So let's say you click on OK, and now if I tick this box, that will be now a default resource, and that will be used in any language pair, okay, for all languages. So setting things up here will help you to have all these default resources, so anytime you make a project, that will happen exactly the way it's set up here. So that's why it's interesting to do it at the very beginning. Okay, so let's say I have set up DeepL, and now I will go to the settings. And these settings here will tell you what to do. So if you want to have empty enabled for pre-translation, that's where you do it. And your translation results. Okay, so let's look at the wording here. Only if there is no good TM match available. Okay, or you can select only if there is no exact match, exact TM match available. So good TM match. So this wording is important. So that's memoQ style of wording things. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, so that's our setting. And now what we want to do is go and set up our TM settings. So let's go there. Okay, so this here is the default setting that memoQ has in there. And let's see what there is. So let's click on Edit. Well, I can't see that. Okay, so when there is a default resource created by memoQ, if you want to see what's in it and edit it, what you need to do is clone it. So default copy, so we'll keep that name so I know what this is. And now I can edit it and see what's in it. Okay, so this is your default rule that memoQ has prepared for you. This is where you can change it. And here we find the same wording as in MT, good match threshold. Okay, so if memoQ, if you have set up empty and memoQ doesn't have a match that is 95% or above, it will then show you the empty result for that. So that's your good match threshold, and in memoQ by default is 95. Now you can change it, but I think it's pretty good to leave it as 95, so I will leave it that way. Now the minimum match threshold means that memoQ will show you any match that is above 60. Now I don't think that's very relevant, especially if you're using a good MT. So some folks like 60%, I prefer 75, so I'll set up that way. Okay, so let's keep that this way, and I will click on OK. And now what I want to do is use my default rule for TMs that I have now created. To select my style, I need to tick it, and this automatically unticks memoQ default, and it brings my setting on top. Now something else you want to check is your locations. Okay, so that is where things will be stored. So the projects folder by default will be in the same area as where memoQ stores all its data. Now if you want to have your projects in a specific area of your computer, maybe the desktop, or maybe in documents, or maybe somewhere you want to be able to find it, so you need to click on custom folder and give the path for that from here so that it can be selected. So for the time being, I leave it there. And the same happens for archive projects folder. So that helps you to have things organized. So every time you create a project, it will go in that spot by default. Another thing we can look at before getting started with anything else is updates. Okay, so this is what you want to do. Check here. So you can have updates. So setting, look for updates online. And you can decide if you want to have updates installed automatically or not. Okay. So now I've set up a few things in here. I will click on apply and I will click on OK. And now it's time for me to create a project. So what you can do is, of course, import a package if it's been sent to you. If you received an email, well, you double click on the icon in the email and that will bring you your cloud project in here. Or you can just decide to create a project. And to create a project, you have here two default templates. The one on top is called 1TM and 1 Termbase or glossary per language pair. And so basically what this will do is that it will keep everything you translate across several projects in the same translation memory, which can be useful. If you don't want that, you can choose the 1TM per client template. So every time you will define who the client is, that will keep the same translation memory for that client across all projects for the same client. So that's the idea. So let's now create a new project. So you go to the arrow here, new project from template. Okay, add documents. So I have these documents ready on my desktop for translation, so I will add them here. So I can click on next. Okay, so I will keep these two languages, English and French. Okay, project name, I will give it a specific name, so that will be test project for YouTube. Okay, and I can move on. Okay, so now I am in my project home view. Okay, you can see project home and it is a tab. Okay, so some other tabs will be added then on the side of it. Okay, I see here the two documents I have set up here. And now I can, in this icon here, add or remove documents for this particular project. Now let's have a look at translation memories. So I have created a translation memory before, but as you can see, it's not selected. So let's say I want to create a new translation memory for this project and for this language pair. So I will click on Create Use New. Okay. And I will give it the name YouTube project. And now I have the languages. Okay, and I have the path. Okay, so if you want your translation memory to be stored in a specific location, well, you can decide that here. Optimization. So here, just to keep it simple, if your computer is very slow, you can dial that down to faster lookup. Okay, but other than that, I'll leave it as that. So I'm ready to click on OK. Now, I have that selected. So we're ready with our translation memory. Now let's add a Termbase. So Termbase is basically a glossary and that will work the same way. So I have none here now. So I will click on Create Use New. Okay, my Termbase. Okay, so you can have several languages in your Termbase, but I will keep it simple now. Okay, I see French is selected. That's great. And English is selected. Of course, you need to decide where you want to have it stored. Okay, but I'll keep it in the same way and I'll give it a name. That's the name for that term base or that glossary. Just click on OK. Alright, and it's selected. Okay, so now I have these two settings ready. So I suggest you start having these two things done every time. Okay, so make sure when you're starting on a project you have translation memory connected to it and Termbase or a glossary. Now I can come back to my translations folder, and now I can get started with translating. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned, maybe some of you people were wondering that when you create a project, you can select a lot of languages. The list of languages available to work in memoQ is 262, and that's including local variants. Okay, so now let's get started with translating, and we'll do that in the next video.